Rebecca, what's the one thing sales managers need to do?
The number one thing sales leaders need to stop doing is going through the motions, working so hard that they forget to work smart and not taking time to use those critical thinking skills that are necessary for success.
The No Limit Selling Podcast, where mindset meets sales and leadership. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the No Limit Selling Podcast. And today we have somebody much needed because this is something that's been vexing CEOs, sales managers, sales leaders, is how to hire talent that actually lives up to their advertising, their hype. Rebecca Gebhardt is the head honcho at Rise Up Consulting. Rebecca, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
So, hiring is something that is, it seems like it would be easy to do. I'm a sales guy, I'm a sales manager, I'm a sales leader, and it should be a piece of cake to hire somebody just like me. But something goes wrong. Like, why is that not the right way to think about it?
I could talk about recruiting, interviewing, and onboarding for years. So I'm going to do my best to keep my answers short here. This is a passion of mine because when so at Rise Up Consulting, we specialize in helping salespeople become sales leaders and then organizations strengthen their sales leadership benches. And a crucial part of that is the recruiting piece. And we would assume, hey, I know how to sell, I can recruit. Or like you were just saying, why can't I just find a bunch of people like me? Well,
Right.
maybe you're not supposed to find a bunch of people like you. Maybe you're supposed to find someone who can be successful in the role and they don't do it the way you do it. So there's a lot of different complexities to recruiting and interviewing and onboarding. And it's just a big problem is that it's not taught. It's just sort of assumed you know how to do it. That's the status quo. And so that's really set a lot of people up for some trial and error, which is really expensive and frustrating for sales leaders to have to go through.
How dare salespeople not do the things like I would do? I mean, it's just an affront. And we really truly believe that if they just did it my way, they would be much further ahead. But there's only one me. And added to that is oftentimes the person I know least turns out to be me. And that's why God created spouses to kind of hold the mirror up and say, this is not you. So why is it so entrenched in our psyche that, it's my way or the highway?
I think people are just doing the best that they can with what they have. And if you found success doing something, which is loose in sales, right? If you're succeeding 30% of the time, you're winning. So you're actually failing more, but we see that as success as long as we, keep doing it. But we find success, and with good intentions, we say, let me teach someone else how to do it this way, not truly thinking through our strengths and our skill sets. I had a client who's now an executive at a publicly traded company, but I started working with her as she just started going from sales to building her team. And this was what she had done. She was a unicorn salesperson, didn't understand why. She just thought everyone should naturally do this. And so we had to work with her to distinguish what her strengths were, what makes her unique, and what's duplicatable. And then within the system, what it would take to be successful in sales. And so what she started to do is she started to not teach people the way she did it necessarily. I mean, she would model, right? That's an important thing.
Right.
But she looked at the unique talents of every salesperson and said, how can they succeed within this loose system? It wasn't just making up everything as she went, of course, and she did that. And when she focused on that, being her best self, bringing out the best in others, understanding where they could duplicate her, understanding where they couldn't and what would work best for them, well, then they increased sales 700%. And she went from 2 salespeople to a team of over 40 in less than a year. So it's just something we do with good intentions.
What's interesting is we have a set of rules that we use when we engage with our customers. And oftentimes, if you're a really good salesperson, it's not about me, it's not about my company, our product, it's all about the customer. And when we adopt that in our sales process, we end up getting bigger wins and more consistent wins. But yet, we have a different set of rules when we're hiring our salespeople or managing our salespeople. It's like, no, 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 no. This is the corporate way. This is our way of doing things. You have to conform to us, as opposed to, you know, what's important to you. So we don't want like total mavericks out there, but also we don't want to impede people from reaching their full potential.
Yeah, it's really interesting. In my next book, which is out in September of 24, I go through all of these little transitions, and there are things you absolutely need to keep doing that worked in sales, but then others we stop doing for some reason. And what you were just talking about is one of those things. Great salespeople ask phenomenal questions. They co-create solutions with their clients, right? They listen. And then they get into leadership and they start talking and teaching more than they listen and learn. And it's a really weird thing, but you kind of go, oh, I'm done with that. I don't need to do that anymore. I'm in leadership now. and it's more critical. And part of the reason people do that is they don't know. These are blind spots, right? They're very common blind spots.
Right.
But we're also modeling leaders that we've had, where we've really respected someone and they always had the answers and they showed us the way. And so we think being a good leader is showing someone else the way. But that's such a common switch. It's like, no, keep that discovery, keep learning about your team, keep asking questions, stay curious. And I think part of the pressure of that is you get into that sales leadership role, and there's so much pressure to show that you know what you're doing. And you show you know what you're doing by telling people what to do. So
Right.
new sales leaders think, and that's not really what it is. It's okay to admit you don't know. It's okay to ask a lot of really good questions or silly questions. But people they feel, as they should, that they're being heard, and that makes you a better leader.
That's such a valuable thing for human beings, is to have the experience of being heard. Because we've all been in rooms where we're actually talking to people. They're there, they're looking at us and might on occasion even nod, but you just get a sense that they're just waiting for you to shut up so they can continue on. So if you can take that breath for a moment and just actually listen to either it's your customer or your salespeople that you're leading, that sometimes the wisdom that you need is in the silences of what they're saying, that you pick up so much when you're being attentive. Because don't listen to the words. Oftentimes you can listen to their body language and their expressions, and they're saying so much more there. But if you're concerned about sounding amazing, I was actually having an interaction with a dear friend. He says, do you realize you go into training mode when you're talking to me in that way? And I went, oh my God, I do. Do you do that?
I do that all the time. My husband comments, and my daughter will also too. She'll say, "Mom, you really don't consult with me right now." Is what
Hilarious.
she says. Yeah, don't consult. But no, what you're talking about, people being heard. There is a word that I have been fixated on because I keep seeing it, but it's curiosity.
Yes.
One of my corporate clients, their executives value curiosity out of their leaders more than, oh, in my experience, more than what they prove that they've learned from the past. And if you're curious, that means you're coachable. That means you're a great listener. That means you're looking forward to the opportunities that your team or company or business or whatever you're on can take advantage of. And I've had to kind of challenge myself with my own my own curiosity, because the things I talk about with these issues with sales leaders are the same issues I have as a consultant.
Yes.
Because at a certain point, we're supposed to know, we're supposed to have the answers. And I'll get into modes where I already know that,
Yeah.
I was, case in point, this is funny. I was reading Carol Dweck's mindset book.
Yes.
For a client. And I'm reading it and I'm like, I already know this. And then I went, I'm having a fixed mindset, reading a
Oh,
growth
yes.
mindset. It was just, you kind of catch yourself. And so, but yeah, that curiosity and that coachability and that openness are so critical for sales leaders, for anywhere you go. But it really is a distinguisher of long-term sustainable success.
So what's kind of curious about curiosity, pun intended, is that it's what if it wasn't about curiosity? That if you had the curious mindset, you would actually accidentally be really listening to the person before you. So a byproduct of curiosity is actually being attentive and actually listening. Because if I want to attend to you, Rebecca, it's like, okay, I'm going to pay attention to what she's saying and how she's saying it. And it's damn difficult. It's like, what if you were curious about how she thinks? Then all of a sudden I'd be going, oh, tell me more. And so I love curiosity for two things. Number one, you find things out. And number two, it accidentally forces you to be a world-class listener.
And you ask phenomenal questions
Yes.
from that curiosity. And so better questions are what help people make them feel heard. And they're also I have learned to ask better questions. I'm still learning. I don't know if you're like me, but the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know. It's kind of this, I feel like I'm getting better, but then I go, there's a lot I don't know out there. But asking those good questions, someone will stop and they'll say, when you've asked a great question out of pure curiosity, because they'll say, wow, that's a good question, or that's it, and you're
Yeah.
helping them, whether you're helping a client or you're helping a team member, but you're helping them process. And oftentimes we know this in coaching, when we help people, we ask great questions, we get curious, we help them find the answer. They go, thank you so much for that answer. And you're like, I didn't give it to you. You did.
But you look like a genius. And I used to be in tech support, and I'd just be listening to them. And halfway through what they were explaining, they'd go, oh, and they'd find their own solution. And they thought I was a genius. And all I did was shut up and let them explain the problem. And what's curious to me is that oftentimes we can't solve the problem, but when we sit down with our sales manager and we explain the problem, the answer becomes self-evident. So the question is, why couldn't I do it myself? Because I had all the knowledge and I'm really, really smart, but something about telling someone else puts you in a different perspective, and you're almost looking at yourself explaining this, and the answer just appears, and you go, man, that sales manager is a genius, when it turned out it was all along, it was you.
Yeah, we have many of the answers inside of us. That is absolutely true. But and people process things differently. Like when I write something and then I say it, it's very different, and it's different for
Oh,
people
yeah.
around us. But what you were just saying is, I wish that we sort of focused more on this in personal development. Obviously, mindset's really important. We've got to do the internal work on ourselves so that we can show up differently. But there is such a power of talking with other people and getting your circle. And because the best ideas happen in groups, there is just this excitement that we get from being around other people and talking, right? It's the same way, I'm sure, with all your podcasts. I don't know, I know you've had over 400 episodes, but I get so excited speaking in front of groups and
Oh, yeah.
organizations, and
Energy there.
yeah, it's just fun because we all like to talk. I mean, that's kind of, fun, but there's so many new ideas that pop up just through conversing with another person. And so their perspective on what we offer, which is the value of, podcasts like this and these different perspectives, it just snowballs. And so I'll catch myself as a small business owner working with clients and being like, when was the last time? Like, when have I talked to my board of directors? When have I, sought out other people who are doing what I'm doing? Or it's just, I catch myself. And so then I can help coach my clients to do that. But it's almost magic what happens when you kind of put a few brains together, whether it be 2 or 20.
One of the things that really excites me, one of the things that really excites me is when you have one or two people with you and somebody comes up with either a really good idea or a really dumb idea. And the second person says, yeah, but how about this? And it goes around 3 or 4 circles and you come up with something that is so powerful. And finding those people that aren't judgmental, are open to possibilities, and creative thinkers allow you to really come up with brilliant ideas very, very quickly. So speaking of brilliant ideas, what are the qualities you look for when you're hiring a salesperson that you want to be great?
Okay. So I could talk about this forever, and I kind of lay this out in my next book. But I think first understanding. So there's a 3 things that I kind of teach throughout. So whether it be sales or sales leadership, are the mindset, the behaviors, and the skill sets that someone needs to be successful
Mm,
in the role. And even defining that, number one. So, and as well, Di, there are different types of salespeople. And I am not, I do not love the one secret or this is the, I don't, because I don't believe in those. It's not one thing. It's based on your situation. And I had made the mistake early in my career, and I've recruited hundreds of salespeople,
mm,
but I would make the mistake of saying, okay, they were successful over here. They're going to be great on my team here. And they weren't, because what worked over there didn't work here. And so I think what it takes to be successful is actually getting, just like you would have an ideal client profile, get an ideal employee profile. Look at the habits, the mindset, and the skill sets that you need now and into the future to be successful in sales. You also then need to look at the top salespeople in your organization and what do they have. And I'm always shocked that people don't do this. Now, some people aren't duplicatable, like the client I was talking about, that unicorn. She's amazing, but some people really aren't duplicatable. But there's aspects of what the top people all have. And they're probably outworking you. They're probably out learning you. They're probably out networking and are managing their energy and their time properly. It's some of those basics. But that would be the first step that I would take to do that. And then you'd want to set up an interview outline with the pre-interview to the first, second, third interview that gets a clear picture on whether they can be successful in the role. You mentioned this earlier. We want to recruit people like us or who we really like. And we're not looking for best friends in business. If you
mm.
get one, that's a bonus. But you're not looking for someone who can sell you. And salespeople are really good at selling. So that's why it's really hard. You need a few interviews, because they'll be like, I can do this and I can do that. But you need to flesh out the pomp versus the performance and the actuality. So I think asking great questions in the interview, determining that the ideal employee profile, and really what success looks like in that role and who can fill that. So I don't have a blanket answer on what those things are, but I would say there are definitely things that you should say, hey, do not, if they aren't motivated by money or winning, don't hire them in sales. If they don't have a vision for themselves, don't hire them in sales. There are a few red flags that I say that it's like you could have a lot of things to be successful. There's a few reasons you wouldn't hire someone.
Brilliant. Something that you were talking about earlier was, great salespeople are always learning. And I think one of the attributes that great salespeople have is they're always learning, but more importantly, they're applying what they learned immediately. And some of the things that they learn do not work, and they discard them or tweak them to make them better. So don't be a professional student if you're in sales. Learn, implement, improve, and move on. And that's the key to becoming a great salesperson. Rebecca, one of the other attributes of a great salesperson is the ability to handle rejection. and to move on. So how do you test for that in the interview process? Can you handle rejection? Absolutely, I can. But how do you actually figure out if this person has the tenacity and the grit to keep on moving when they hear a no? And this is not to bulldoze people over, but oftentimes you need to overcome those objections to kind of get to the real objection and figure out whether you can help them or not. So, how do you test for that in the interview process?
By asking the question you're asking right now, how? So, how did you do that in the past? How did you work through rejection and have to really have perseverance? That how question is the best follow-up question to, oh, yeah, I consider myself, to have a lot of persistence and grit and determination, all that stuff. Great. Tell me a story about that. And the way that you can look for if people are actually telling the truth or not is
Mm,
how fast that they respond and how specific that they are. If they're vague in their response, it's not really a true answer. And so, how I would answer that question, or things I would look for, right? I would give a story about my past, and I would say, well, this is a true story. I got my start in sales working 80 hours a week, door to door, selling educational books and software. And so I'd knock on 30 to 50 doors a day. My goal was to sit down. Would give 30 presentations, but to sit down with 10 of them and have one or two buy. And being rejected 90% of the time did not feel good as a 19, 20-year-old. And as
oh,
I
yeah.
did it for 6 years. But I learned that in sales, the more no's you get, the more yeses you get. And I had to work through that. I had to overcome wanting to quit every single day and crying on the curb on my bike, because I was literally a peddler. I was pedaling around, I'm selling these books. And so, if someone I'm interviewing doesn't have a story like that, it doesn't mean they're a bad candidate, but it would mean that the perception they maybe have of sales and what it really is going to take to get into that role is going to be different. And I say that because, as Gen Z comes into the workforce now, by 2025, they're going to be 25%, 27% of the working. They may or may not have as many experiences because their parents set them up to succeed, right? They kind of got rid of all those things that could help build those persistent muscles in their brains. And so I think it's clarifying with people what that really means, what it means in that role. And if it's okay if there's a gap of what they think that looks like, that definition, but clearing that definition up in the interview process is really important, or you're going to recruit a great person for the wrong role.
So one of the things that we hear all the time is, the more no's you get, the more yeses you get. And that is like a painful, horrible experience to go through. But I think what's really happening, if you do it right, if you go in and you get beat up with no's and you work your way to the yeses, that's one way to go. The other way to go is to, when you hear the no's and you kind of walk out of that meeting and go, why did I get a no? How did I react? What can I change to get better? That you get inoculized as you go through the no process and you start getting more yeses, not necessarily just a numbers game. If you don't learn from the no's, then it's a numbers game. But if you learn from the no's, all of a sudden you start getting more yeses. The ratio changes dramatically. So go after the no's, but go after the why did I get a no? What do I need to do better? And that's the best way to become a supreme salesperson.
Absolutely. And so it doesn't feel like a loss then, because you have
Yeah.
a lesson, you have more in your bag of tricks, you have more experience. And so you may not have walked away with an order, you may not have walked away with a sale, but you walked away with something that you can use in the future. And that's almost better sometimes than getting a sale that's not going to help you again.
So, Rebecca, in organizations, when it's done right, they have a culture in the organization that binds everybody together, that allows people to be their very best when they're performing their task, that allows them to outthink and outpace the competition. But sometimes the sales organization has a different culture. So, how do you balance the culture that the sales team needs to have which doesn't have to be at odds with the company culture, but has to be nuanced. So how do you balance the two? How do you get the sales team not to have like if you remember the Steve Jobs days when they're doing the Mac team, like they're the pirates. Everybody else are like laggards, we're the pirates. And it created a rift in the company. So how do you still get people that are hunters, but they don't alienate the rest of the company?
You don't put up with the jerks. That's what you do. It is really hard if the reason I love sales is that there are some salespeople who lose their jobs, right? If there's like cuts, there's cuts. But if you are a revenue producer and you're good at your job, you will always have a job, right? Because
Right.
it shows up on the bottom line, and it's harder for other things. But that does not mean that companies have to tolerate a negative employee. And there have been several times in my career where I have messed up on this, where I went, I need their sales. And it was problem after problem until I realized that all of my time and energy was dealing with this high producer's complaints. And no matter what I did for them, it was never enough. And I went, are we actually better with this person's with this person on the team? And the thing to realize with sales, it used to be really broken up. Like sales, there was an old uh, leader of a company I used to work for that was like, we don't need marketing. You know, if you're good enough in sales, you don't need marketing. But everything's
That's the
so
loser.
intertwined. I know. Yeah. One of those losers. They can't get sales on their own. Yeah. It was a weird philosophy. He's no longer alive. That was like many years ago, but his
Did you
philosophy.
take him out?
What?
Did you take him out?
No, I didn't take him out. No. He was a billionaire. I didn't take him out.
Oh, nice.
He must be rich. He must know all, right? That's something too. Success. You're not wrong, or you have a lot of money. You must know what you're doing. Not actually true. But it's this. You don't need to tolerate bad cultures for
Right.
performance, and so you have to look at the values of your organization. And it is very important to value performance in sales. I'm not saying that should not be a value, but the best organizations that continue to scale sustainably, continue to thrive, are the ones that are very clear on their values. They recruit people for those values. They promote and reward for those values and the sales that the salespeople give. And it's a much more fun experience to be on. And all of the stats about the future generations and what they want, you could keep that top jerk salesperson, but you're much better off for the future of your organization is to do things with the right people. And a mantra that I like to say is that you want to do the things that matter for the reasons that matter with the people that matter in a way that matters. And if anyone's squashing on any of that, just get them off the team. They can go work somewhere else.
Love that. So, Rebecca, tell me about someone that you had hired that you thought would be a star in your organization that did not do that, but you were able to figure out what the block was and coach them through that. And then they shine in a way that you went, wow, that's the person I saw.
Yeah. Well, I have a great example of that. So when I was in the insurance business, I recruited a friend of mine who had phenomenal sales background, same background that I had previously. And it was, we did the door-to-door sales together, and the insurance was business to business. We're calling on small businesses. It was supplemental insurance. And I thought, this is going to be great. The problem that I hadn't thought through was that the old job was 3 months out of the year. Anyone can do anything. It was a summer job for college kids. Anyone can do something for 3 months, get in their zone, put on their working hat, brainwash themselves, with like positive self-talk for 3 months. But then carrying that out for a full year with the other nuances, like that was the only thing we were doing. Well, now you've got other life and balancing, and it's like, how do you multitask? And so the emotional roller coaster for her was very large, and I was able to help her through that. And so we were able to find, because she could perform at extremes, right? She was extremely working or extremely on vacation. So I was able to help her be like, okay, this is what I have to do consistently for a right. You don't need to be at 100 all the time. You can probably sustain it at 80. Sometimes it calls for 100. Sometimes you can be at a 30. That's when you're off of work, And so, but we just didn't think through some of those differences. And I think that as part of recruiting or part of these mismatches, there's an exercise that I do with people called the expected unexpected. And you can get these lists together, but they're so helpful to mentally prepare people, especially when you're onboarding for sales or in your new role as in sales leadership. There are all of these challenges that come up, and we never know when they're going to come up, but they always come up. They're expected. They're the expected unexpected. And so getting a list together of, I don't sell anything for a month, or I'm the top salesperson and I'm freaked out about keeping that up, or someone ghosts me, or I get to the end stages of a deal and then it falls through. I've been working on it for whatever that is, right? Same things in leadership. That's so helpful to be getting blindsided. And it's funny because sometimes I would have the discipline to do that with everyone. And then others, I'm like, they don't need to do that. We'll just skip that with them. And then those problems came up and they go, you didn't tell me about this. And so I would fail them as a leader. And we don't want to do that. So whether you're in sales or sales leadership, what are the expected, unexpected things that can happen for you in your role? Talk to other people who have been there. Or if you're preparing someone on your team in sales, what are the expected, unexpected things that happen? And how can you mentally prep someone so that that wall, when they hit it, isn't so hard? You're kind of putting the rubber around them and making them bounce off and be able to tack the next wall.
Love that. Rebecca, you are wise in the ways of hiring great sales talent. How can people get a hold of you? How can they find you?
I live on LinkedIn, so you can find me on there. People can also check out our website, which is riseupconsultinggroup.com. And we have different workshops and keynotes and programs for individual sales leaders and corporate sales leadership teams that covers things like recruiting, like the mindset shifts, time and energy management, the top challenges for salespeople. And what it really does is it focuses on these skills that have immediate impacts on recruiting, retention, and revenue. So that's the LinkedIn, and our website would be the best place to find me.
Brilliant. I learned a lot on this. Thank you so much for being on the show, and looking forward to our next conversation.
Yep. Thanks for having me.
The No Limit Selling Podcast, where mindset meets sales and leadership.